What is a learning disability? Learning disabilities, or LDs, affect the way the brain takes in, stores, and recalls information.
My name is Andrea Huebner, and I'm a pediatric neuropsychologist at the Mayo Clinic Children's Center. I'm going to be talking with you today about academic concerns in children, which sometimes might be characterized as a learning disability or a learning disorder. Most children at some point in their schooling will have challenges in their education. And in fact, this is really the way we want it to be, because we want kids to be sufficiently challenged. Otherwise, we're setting the bar too low for their development. But there are also a subset of children who really struggle throughout their education at a different level than their peers. And these are kids who are putting in good effort and who have good educational support at home, but who just struggle to master concepts and to learn new things. And these are the children that we might characterize as having a learning disability or a learning disorder. Parents are sometimes very dismayed when their children have learning problems, because we often relate academic achievement to potential career opportunities and life success. So it can be troubling when you see your child struggling. Fortunately, there are lots of things that we can do to help, and we do live in a day and age where there is lots of good treatment available if we can get these children identified early and get them the help that they need. And often this helps to avoid years of struggle in school as they move through toward graduation. So parents will often ask, what are the early signs of a learning disability, and how might I know that my child would be one who would go on to struggle to learn? So these signs can be difficult to spot, because having just one or two of them is probably not meaningful, or it can be a sign of some condition other than a learning disability. So it's important to take a measured and cautious approach when you're thinking about your young child and how his or her development is progressing. But the things that we often see associated with later learning disabilities are things like delayed speech and language development. So kids who talk later, and even after they do develop language, their sentence structure and the length of utterance, is what we call it, is much shorter than other children. They also might have difficulty in their fine and gross motor skill development. Sometimes children will have trouble with following directions or just understanding basic kind of learning concepts. Vocabulary that they might have heard many times just doesn't seem to stick. A little bit older, when we're looking at kids who are preschoolers, these children might have difficulty remembering the names of letters and numbers. And they also might have difficulty with doing like early literacy skills like rhyming. So those are some of the things that we see. But again, it really would be a combination of those skills that would signal the possible presence of a learning disability, rather than just one or two of those characteristics.
Welcome to this tutorial on the information processing theory. Every second of every day, we are exposed to thousands of stimuli. Our brain takes in information through sight, sound, smell, and touch. These are known as the senses. Sounds are picked up by the echoic memory, and images are picked up by the iconic memory. This information is then transferred to the sensory memory. Only when we pay particular attention to a particular sense is it then transferred from our sensory memory to our short-term memory. Our short-term memory contains information about what we see and hear in this present moment in time. The short-term memory has a very limited storage capacity and cannot permanently hold this information. Your long-term memory, on the other hand, is exactly the opposite. It is large and permanently stores information. The process of getting information from your short to your long-term memory is called encoding. Encoding is when you create a connection between the memories you already have and the new memories received. The processing of getting memories out of your long-term memory and back into your short-term memory for use is called retrieval. When our short-term memory experiences a large number of senses, it can become overwhelmed. When this happens, we use a process called selective attention. This filters out the messages that are not important to us, allowing us to focus on those that are. When considering the concept of multitasking, we realize that it is possible to do visual and auditory tasks at the same time. For example, talking and walking. However, we cannot do 2 visual or auditory tasks at the same time. For example, reading 2 books or watching 2 TV shows. Yes, if we do this, some information may get through, but it will be limited. Finally, when our senses receive a message, a search happens to determine what the response to the message will be. For example, when you bang your head, the search and response may be to sit down or call for help. Search and response organizes your actions, telling your body exactly what to do. Feedback is then received through observation to check if the response was effective. If you view a response as being effective, it will then be stored in your long-term memory for future use.
What is a learning disability? Learning disabilities, or LDs, affect the way the brain takes in, stores, and recalls information. LDs come in many forms and affect people with varying levels of severity. They can interfere with learning basic skills, such as reading, writing, organization, time management, and social communication skills. Living with a learning disability can have an ongoing impact on friendships, work, and self-esteem, to name a few. However, students with learning disabilities can succeed when they have access to specific instructions and compensatory strategies to help them overcome their difficulties. Students with LDs may experience problems in the classroom environment with reading, writing, mathematics, executive function, and social situations. A learning disability can affect students differently across different academic tasks and settings. For example, in reading, a student with an LD may experience problems recognizing words and breaking them down into their individual sounds, reading fluently, or understanding what is read. In writing, a student with an LD may experience problems with handwriting, putting thoughts on paper, organizing written work, or with spelling and grammar. In math, a student with an LD may experience problems in learning number facts, doing arithmetic and calculation, using symbols in math, and in understanding visual spatial relationships. These students may also experience problems in executive functioning in areas such as organizing, time management, planning and decision-making, or in problem-solving. Lastly, they may also experience problems with social situations in interpreting facial expressions, understanding body language, tones of voice, or in taking turns in conversations. How will I know if one of my students has an LD? Parents are often the first to notice that something doesn't seem right. If you are aware of the common signs of learning disabilities, you'll be able to recognize potential problems early. If you suspect that one of your students has a learning disability, it's important to communicate with both the parents of the student and school board professionals so they can be referred to the appropriate medical resources. A student with an LD may receive an individual education plan, or IEP, based on their strengths and needs, as documented by a psychological assessment. Students with LDs often have difficulties that extend beyond those in class and have an impact on them throughout their lives. Developing a special skill or talent can help students to be successful and feel appreciated for their contributions. Teachers can also recognize the student's specific areas of strength and need and create teachable moments to model and reinforce positive skills. Proceed in small steps, demonstrate and give multiple examples, offer practice and feedback, reinforcement and praise. Try to minimize competition and focus instead on students' self-esteem and cooperative learning by creating opportunities for shared learning and joint activities. Remember that every student is unique and that each and every one of them has different learning needs. Your role as a teacher is to ensure that the material you are teaching is accessible to each of your students using strategies that are effective and differentiated. Get to know your students' IEPs and use the recommended interventions and accommodations. Lastly, don't forget that you are surrounded by a team of professionals to support you and your students. To take a more in-depth look at any of the information we presented, please consult the resources section of our website at ld@school.ca.
Does your child have trouble learning? Is your child having difficulties in school that are getting in the way of their learning? Talk to your child's teacher or other professionals in the school who can help decide what support might be needed. After all the classroom supports have been tried, it might be time to look into special education. Step 1. Referral. If you are worried about how your child is doing in school, you can ask for an evaluation of their abilities and needs. This may be requested at any time by making a referral in writing to the Committee on Preschool Special Education or to the Committee on Special Education. The Committees on Special Education includes the child's parents, special ed teachers, regular education teachers, and other professionals. Step 2. Individual evaluation. The school will complete an evaluation of the child's abilities and needs to see if special education services might help them. Step 3. Determining eligibility for special education services. After the child's evaluation is completed, the CPSE or CSE will meet to decide what special education services would help your child. Step 4. Individualized Education Program, or the IEP. Once your child is eligible to receive special education services, the committee creates an Individualized Education Program, or an IEP. The IEP is a document that describes the child's strengths and the supports and services he or she will receive and the goals for the year. Step 5. Annual review or reevaluation. The committee must review the IEP at least once a year to see if the goals are being met and progress is being made. The child must be formally reevaluated at least every 3 years. However, the program may be reviewed at any time. Did you know? The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, was enacted by Congress in 1975 to ensure that children with disabilities have the opportunity to receive a free, appropriate public education, just like other children. 8.4% of students receive special education services under IDEA. And parents are a very important part of every step in the process. Parental involvement is strongly encouraged.